kindness is not weakness. Gemma, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your practice and your credentials?
Okay, so I have a degree in psychology. I have a postgrad in integrative counselling and coaching, which means that I don't follow a single modality. So we've all heard of CBT, person-centred, so I work with clients using different approaches in a way that works for them. I was in the corporate space for 35 years, working for very large corporates in London, and identified issues with myself and with other people. So I decided that I wanted to run a therapy practice, and that's what I decided to do.
So what motivated you to go into therapy in the first place?
So I was in therapy, so I was in an abusive relationship for 19 years. So I went into therapy. I had my psychology degree and I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it. So I did some mental health and wellbeing things at work. And I decided, well, my therapist suggested it actually. We were talking and she said, I think you might make a good therapist. So I thought about it. And in therapy, I'd raised all the insights. We'd had all the conversations and I knew why I was behaving in the way that I was behaving. I understood the behaviour of other people, but I couldn't really do anything with it. Yeah. So that's why I chose a postgrad that included coaching, so that I could then take the insight and then take it forward. And that's really what led me to the space.
So Gemma was my therapist for about a year. We saw each other almost every single week. And I think I'm a completely different person than I was 12 months ago. I don't think 12 months ago I could have been sitting in this space, in this chair, doing what I'm doing right now. So let's talk a little bit about the topic of abusive behaviors. So we want to delve into emotional abuse, bullying tactics. So not just necessarily in romantic relationships, which is where I think people, their minds typically go when you talk about this. But I think you can be exposed to abusive behaviors in friendships, in the workplace, all over the place. So tell us, what typically constitutes abusive behavior?
So abuse is a power imbalance. So it's generally somebody using tactics, so coercion, manipulation. Bullying it tends to be threat of violence or shouting. So what it's doing is it's creating a power imbalance where the abuser, if you like, is creating power over. So they have power over another person. Yeah. And that puts the person in the victim space.
And what are the effects on a victim if you've been exposed to abusive behavior for a prolonged period of time? What generally happens to people?
So the first thing that happens is confidence. So it has quite a marked impact on confidence and self-belief, because quite often somebody who is demonstrating these traits will find a weakness. They will find a thing that they will then exploit to create that power. So it's something that somebody normally already is not feeling confident about. So that will enhance that so that then their confidence drops in that. They may also, bullying in the workplace, for example, they may undermine other things about that person. And even though you can start off going, no, that's not me, over time, if it carries on, then you have a detrimental effect.
It wears you down and it starts to plant a little seed in your mind. I think a lot of us have been in situations where we feel uncomfortable and we feel like, I don't know if this is right, but I think for me, I was 30 before I could be strong enough to hold my boundaries and to say, this is unacceptable behavior, this is abusive behavior, I'm not okay with it. So what are some red flags that people can look out for, that they can say, okay, this is abusive behavior, I need to draw a line here? Because I think sometimes it creeps, like, it starts as something small and then it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And you're sort of like the frog in the boiling pot. So what can people look out for to know that they're in a situation that is not okay?
It's noticing how you feel. So if you start to have an anxious reaction when you're going to come across that person. And it can happen, as you say, it can happen in friendships. So if you're meeting your friend and you're going for a coffee and this friend is very particular about time, whereas normally you would be, oh, okay, so I need to be on time. But if you find yourself going, okay, so I need to be on, and you're having an emotional, anxious reaction.
Yeah.
Also, boundaries. Boundaries are a really easy way to see. Somebody who abuses power will not hold your boundaries. So if you keep putting boundaries in and that person keeps jumping over them or refuses to listen to them, so quite often they'll cut dead a conversation, they'll leave a conversation, so that again you have no power. So they'll say something and then they'll walk away.
Yeah.
So then you're left sitting there going, well, what just happened?
Yeah. And you feel that frustration of, but I didn't get to have my say. I wasn't heard, you know, that frustrated feeling of not being heard. So what should you do if you find yourself in this position at work, in a relationship, a friendship, and you start thinking to yourself, okay, this person is abusive. What should you do?
So if you're not sure, talk to your friends. Obviously, you can always talk to a therapist if it's been going on for a long time. But try and put some boundaries in, and see what happens.
Yeah.
So a really simple boundary, you know, somebody who, we go back to timing from the other way. So somebody that's always late. So saying, you know, I would really appreciate it, and setting your boundaries quite clearly, but not aggressively, because you don't want to put the other person on the defensive. But, you know, saying, when we meet, I really would appreciate it and need you to be there on time. See what happens, you know, and also look at your confidence.
Yeah.
So try and do some work. First of all, try and do some work on your confidence, because if you identify actually how are you feeling in all of your other relationships, because it does tend to have an impact. Being in an abusive relationship isn't just, well, when I'm with that person I feel terrible, when I'm with everybody else I feel wonderful.
Yeah.
Over time it impacts other things. So spend time with the people that you love and that you trust, and really try not to second guess or find a reason why somebody's behaving in that way. So somebody who's abusive will behave in a way that makes no sense to you at all, because when you look, you say, you're behaving like that, that's going to make me withdraw from you. That's going to damage our relationship. So that's what's so confusing about abuse, because you're trying to rationalise it.
Yeah.
And you can't rationalise it. You don't know their motivation and you don't know their backstory. So they are saying, well, if I do this, then I'm going to have power over. They don't necessarily, they know they want that power, but they're not entirely sure what they're going to do with it.
Right. What causes people to become abusive?
So abuse can carry through. So abusive relationships, abusive parents, teachers, friendships. The thing that's hard in abuse is to say the abuse stops with me. And then you say, okay, I've noticed that behaviour, I don't like it, I'm going to change it. It is a choice. It's not, oh, well, you're going to be abusive because you were born that way.
Yeah.
You know, there may be some tendencies, you may see things in family, but it is a choice. The problem is that once somebody starts moving down that path, it depends on where they are as to whether they can recover.
Yeah.
Because if you've got to the stage where you are a narcissist, so you've reached narcissism, so you have narcissistic personality disorder, you believe that you are right and everybody else is wrong, you cannot be challenged. There is a part of that person that doesn't believe that, but it's very, very hard to reach. Although you can have somebody who's maybe been bullied and then is bullied, and there is something that person could potentially do. So if we don't go to narcissism, and then it is somebody who can actually have self-reflect and say, okay, I'm not really behaving the way that I should, or this, 5
feel it in
people
your
have
gut.
said, yeah,
like, this isn't sitting right with me, I know I made that person unhappy.
yeah, or it's quite easy in a workplace, because in a workplace, hopefully HR or some colleagues will come and say, okay, you're behaving like this, and it's really not okay. It's important to call people out on their behaviour, but there is some caution with abuse. So we're talking about emotional abuse, and obviously somebody is using words and trying to undermine you or hurt you. It's just being quite careful about abusers can escalate.
Yeah. How do abusers generally take it when you do call out their behaviour? Because for me, I've been in this situation and I've experienced a lot of gaslighting. I think that's always the go-to, is like character assassinate the victim, justify the behaviour. So I do it because I love you, or I'm trying to teach you something, or it's your fault because you made me angry, or, all those justifications. You deserved it because of X, Y, Z. And then when you stand up to an abuser, it's the gaslighting of, you're overreacting, you're too sensitive, you're too emotional, it's not professional to be emotional in the workplace or whatever. So is that generally like the road that they go down?
Can be. I mean, it's denial. That didn't happen.
Yeah.
So lying, basically. They'll misremember. That they may not remember things the same way that you did. So then if you think that your behaviour is okay, somebody calling you out, it's like, no, that didn't happen.
Like what?
Yeah. And where you get you're too sensitive.
Yes.
Or they can escalate. And this is where I'm saying, it's if you have somebody who's emotionally abusive but quite loud and can be aggressive verbally, then that can really step up. So then that will be shouting, and that will be a lot of anger.
Yeah.
But sometimes it goes quiet. So sometimes nothing is said at the time. And this is the most insidious and the most difficult, is that you think, oh, you've challenged them and they're okay. But then what happens with abusers sometimes is that they will have there will be punishment coming at some point. Sometimes it will come immediately. Sometimes all of a sudden you see that person again, there's a bit of an atmosphere.
Yeah.
They're not really talking. You're not really sure if you've done something. They haven't said anything.
Yeah.
So you okay? Yep, fine.
Yeah, the passive aggressive. What should you do? So if you are neither the victim nor the bully, you're an observer. So you might be a family member, a friend, a colleague, and you identify that this is happening. What should you do?
It's difficult. It depends on the circumstances. If it's a close friend, if it's happening to a close friend, then check in with them, check that they're okay. It's not pointing. It's not. We can't all go around diagnosing and say this person is an abuser, this person is a narcissist. Only a psychiatrist can do that. But it is about checking in with people. Are you okay? If somebody has said something, it's like you seemed quite uncomfortable when you were being talked to in that way.
Yeah.
Are you okay? Is there anything going on? Do you need a chat? Because the other thing is that sometimes people aren't going to be realising that this is what's going on for them.
Exactly.
And you almost always need. I was very grateful to have a friend, because I thought I'm in a relationship, it's give and take, it's just compromise. It was having somebody to say, are you okay with that? Because that doesn't seem quite right to me.
Yeah.
So you're not directly saying, you're giving them the power. They need to have the power still.
Yeah.
If it's happening with a family member, the same, if you can. If you're talking about the person that it's happening to.
Yeah.
If you're noticing
what if
it,
you're on the other side? Yeah.
If it's a family member, then it's gently trying to talk to them first about their behaviour. I noticed that, when you were talking to Jane, you were really raising your voice, and you seemed like, your tone seemed a bit over the top. Were you aware of that? It's just, you're just gently talking to them.
Yeah.
If it's at work, then obviously there are implications for workplace bullying. So, most employers don't want to be at the wrong end of a tribunal. So it's raising it to HR, raising it to management, being aware. In that instance, you might need to document.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just so that you've got that information should you need it. It's very different in the workplace, because in the workplace you have, in some ways it's easier, or it should be easier, because you should have workplace policies about bullying.
How do you get out of an abusive relationship? I'm not necessarily talking about work, because that's easy, you just leave the company. But like you, for 19 years, how did you leave? What did you do?
How did I leave? It was really interesting. So I started to have therapy because I knew that I needed therapy. I was very, very passive. I was probably unrecognisable from the person I am today. So I started to have therapy, and I started to make a plan. So in a romantic relationship, I needed to have a plan. So I started to make a plan. And I remember I went to my therapist and said, right, so my plan is to leave by Christmas, and I need to build up my resilience, increase my confidence, and feel comfortable, because the problem with abuse is that you lose your confidence, but also you have a lot of anxiety. So I was anxious about a lot more things than just the relationship. So I did that, but then it was quite empowering. I went and had a wonderful afternoon with all my friends. We went and we had a picnic and we were dancing, and my son was there and he was having a great time. And all of a sudden I felt this creeping dread, this literally from my toes going up, and even talking about it, I can feel it here. And it was this thing, and it was just like, what is the matter with you? And I looked at my watch and it was time. It was coming to time to go home. And I just thought, I can't do this anymore. I want to have this feeling where I'm having a nice time and I'm relaxed and I'm feeling safe.
Yeah, that's how you should feel at home, yeah.
So then I went back to my therapist the next week and went, right, I'm going to do this now. And I just put all the plans in. I mean, there's quite a few plans to put in place, and there are charities that can help you in a relationship. In friendships, it can be simpler. It's really about walking away.
And I think you just need to be aware of what the reaction is going to be. I think generally it will firstly be anger, and then it will be gaslighting, possibly guilting, manipulation. They will employ tactics to stop you from leaving their life, all kinds of tactics. So they might like pull on your heartstrings, like, oh, but what will I do without you? And those kinds of things. But that is just more abusive behaviour.
And that's why you need the plan. So an abuser is at his most or her most dangerous when they're losing their power. So that's why you have to have a plan in place. If you're going to tell somebody, you need to make sure that you've got somebody checking in. So you're going to say, right, I'm going to say at this time, I'm just going to check in with you, or can you ring me? And it sounds very dramatic, but it's just making sure.
Yeah, putting those safety procedures in place. Yeah.
If it's a family member, it's tricky, because then you've got the rest of your family who might actually just let that person be the way they are. So that's quite tricky to negotiate, and that's making sure that you have to do what's right for you.
Yeah.
And not what's right for everybody else in that situation.
Yeah, I've experienced that sometimes I can identify a behaviour that is absolutely unacceptable to me and crosses my boundaries at many levels. And I will have to end my relationship with that person. But other people who have a similar relationship with that person, or with them and me, take it really badly. Sometimes they will get really angry that you want to end your relationship with this person, where to me it seems very obvious that their behavior is unacceptable. But I think a lot of the time that other person just isn't ready yet to accept that this person is an abuser. But you still have to do it. If you know it's the right thing for you and you need to get this person out of your life, you have to do that.
And it's really useful to identify what's your stuff and what somebody else's stuff
Exactly.
is. So your stuff is, to you, that behaviour is unacceptable. Now, you might have abuse in families where siblings are treated differently. Narcissists can quite often have the favourite child and then the other children. So it's about you doing what's right for you and trying not to take other people's reactions are down to their experience and their stuff. So it's trying to say, okay, so leave them with their stuff and you take your stuff to do what's right for you.
I think it takes a lot of self-awareness to, not everybody can identify an abuser, excuse me, and say, I need to cut this off. I need to end this. I think there's a lot of fear around it, particularly if that person has also been subjected to abuse from this person. They might still be just too scared to stand up and say, I'm not going to accept this. Sorry, but this is not going to fly with me anymore. I'm done. And from fear comes anger. So a lot of the time that person will get really angry with you for rocking that boat because they're afraid of the abuser. But that can't sway your decision.
It can't. I mean, yes, if, it's almost like, well, if you're not there to be abused, then I'm going to have to deal with all of the abuse. And that's quite difficult. But that might not even be a conscious thought. It might just be feelings of fear. Because
exactly.
As we said, they may not realise that they're in that situation.
I don't think they do. I think they just feel this panic, if you do that, am I going to have to start thinking about this? Am I going to have that conversation? I don't want to have that conversation. I'm too afraid of this person to have this conversation. Sort of on that note, is abuse conscious or is it not? Does the person know that they're doing it?
It's a really hard question.
Yeah.
It's a really hard question to know from the brain what is a conscious choice and what isn't. It may have started as conscious and then come into their psyche. People will have patterns, and also people, even when you look for start with children, people do what gets them the results they want. So if I behave like this, hey, I get this, yay, great. So
I'm carry on doing it.
They carry on doing it, especially if there are no consequences.
Yes, exactly.
So I'm going to do this, and then that person does what I want, and then there's no consequences, so that's great.
I guess there's also a level of denial, like we said before, that I'm not doing anything wrong. This is fine. This is how you have a relationship, Couples fight. Relationships are hard sometimes, That's how they justify their own behavior, or from a parenting point of view, I need to raise this child. I need to teach this child what's right from wrong, and that's what I'm doing. I'm doing my best. So I think an abuser doesn't necessarily identify their own abusive behaviour.
They won't always question it either.
No.
So it depends, again, it depends on the type of abuser and how entrenched it is. But they aren't going to think about it as a problem. Because for some of them, they can't be wrong. So that deeply held belief that there is something wrong with them, that they are whatever abuse or whatever they'd experienced, that creates that feeling. They can't allow that feeling, so they're very unlikely to self-reflect.
Okay, so wrapping up, final question. Do you have a book to recommend to us? Something that's going to change our lives? Or more than one?
Or more than one. I think Brené Brown's The Art of Imperfection, which isn't about abuse, but is very much about accepting yourself for who you are. I think it's that kind of thing.
Once you have the self-acceptance and the peace that I feel I've achieved over the last year, it's just a solid foundation of, I know what my value is, I know what my worth is, I know what I bring to the table. And I think once you feel like that, you won't accept those kinds of behaviors from other people. How I treat myself is the standard I set, and I won't accept anybody treating me worse than that. So maybe that's the fundamentals of it, is working on yourself.
Yeah, and boundaries. I mean, it's quite hard to find good books about boundaries. There are some. need to find and give you some words, but
That's fine. We can
boundaries
always
are
add
important.
links.
We can add links. The
Yeah.
other thing is, it's about finding a solution that works for you. So there's lots of books. Also, spend time with your friends, you know, talk to your friends, make sure that you've got that support network.
And check in with yourself.
And check in with yourself. Yeah, Glennon Doyle as well. So a
Yes.
lot of Glennon Doyle's
Yes.
books are really good. If you've experienced abuse and you have shame, I think Carolyn Spring wrote a book called Unshamed, which is a very, very powerful book, and she has a way of writing things that really resonate.
So if you have been a victim of abuse and you're trying to move on and heal from that.
Yeah, and you have the shame, because the other thing that abusers give you is shame.
Yeah.
So it's that it's your fault.
I did
it's
something
your
to
problem.
deserve this. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me, Gemma.
It was lovely to see you. Bye.
Your support helps me work towards positive change. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.